Thank you so much for the invitation, Marcelo, and congratulations with the initiative. And hopefully, everyone is will become wiser, or more engaged, or more active, or will actually find the passion short term, medium term, and long term, because passion also and the focus might change along our professional careers. And that's a little bit what happened with my career. And although the passion for innovation was always there, but in terms of the industry and in terms of the focus, it shifted, not year over year, but I would say decade over the decade. And not because things are better, or as they say, the grass is always greener on the other side, but because the experiences that we acquire, things that we manage to do or accomplish, always lead towards the, I would say, the next stage. You meet more people along the way, you discover more interesting things that are happening, or more challenging things, or the challenges that you would like to dedicate your time to. So this, I see this as a natural progression. And that has changed, I think, within the course of the past 20 years. Um, I recall reading an interview with Bill Gates in Financial Times about 10 years ago, where one of the very famous reporters of Financial Times, Simon Sharma, asked Bill Gates as to his new focuses and new passions and new initiatives after Microsoft. And so he mentioned a number of the new things that he was busy with that spanned across a number of fields that he was not busy with before. And the question was a little bit posed in a way that kind of questioned his abilities to deliver things in the fields that he's not an expert in. And I really like the answer of Bill Gates at that point, because he answered that we shouldn't be boxed in one area of expertise. The skills that we acquire are transferable, and as long as it's led, as Marcelo mentioned, with passion, I think we can accomplish much more than we can think, and also we can accomplish much more than we condition ourselves to be able to accomplish. So that was a little bit of introduction. Since I'm not sure how many of you on the call and where you're from, and I cannot interact, so I will just do it as a narrative. I was asked to speak tonight a little bit about what I do within the very complex field of energy transition. So I'm not sure how many of you already understand, know, or are interested in energy transition. I think, and hopefully many of you already heard the terms related to climate change, climate neutrality, problems related to the adverse weather conditions, about problems that climate change causes already in the short term, medium term, and the long term. Hopefully you did hear some things related to the concentration of the CO2 in the atmosphere and the effects. If not, I strongly advise to look it up and get yourself interested. There were lots of efforts done to bring that message closer to school-aged children, explain what it is. And I think it would be really good if you manage to form your own opinion by studying some of the details of what it means, or paying attention to it. So I won't be able to cover all of those topics today that I mentioned, but I really encourage you to Google or use any other source of information related to these topics, and trying to understand how all of our lives are going to be impacted within the next 10, 15, 20, and 30 years. And why I'm mentioning this timeframes and timelines, it's not by chance. It's because the policy on the both international level, global level, the European level, is linked to this decades. We do know as humanity, basically, that what kind of CO2 emission targets we need to, or the maximum that we can reach, and what needs to be done in order to stop those emissions. And here's a complicated term that I'm going to introduce, but hopefully it should be important for you to understand what kind of decarbonization targets should be in place in order to reach so-called climate neutrality by 2050. And as you might have already heard, there are a number of countries that made the commitments already to reach this climate neutrality, and be part of so-called Paris Agreement. That's another thing that I would like you to wise up about and at least have a look at. So which countries? Europe is strongly, as a continent and as member states, is strongly advocating reaching climate neutrality by 2050. And this is what this very complex image is all about. It is complex because there are many parts of it, and it is complex because it would take a lot of effort, a lot of people, a lot of technologies, a lot of innovation, a lot of research to get there. And so that you can put it into the perspective, what does it mean to reach the climate neutrality by 2050 as a time frame? As you recall, one of the recent history events was the fall of the Berlin Wall. So now we are halfway, historically, as the timeline, from that moment till 2050. So it's exactly the same time, from the fall of the Berlin Wall till 2050, when we have to reach climate neutrality in order to prevent the adverse climate events. So it's a long, but it's a short time in terms of what can be accomplished on the global level. So as I mentioned, Europe really pays attention to it and puts lots of effort to it. So what you see on the picture is the result of really collective work that was done by a very large community of experts, more than 300 experts, energy experts in Europe, and as well as various consultations with other stakeholders. And so a lot of people got together and started thinking as to what would it take and where the effort should be in order to decarbonize the economy by 2030 and 2050. And so these are the areas of energy sector. And as you understand, energy is transversal. That's another complicated term for you to ponder on, to everything that we do, everything that is being produced, everything that we can accomplish. It's transversal to mobility, to the way that we go from point A to point B. It's essential also to the industries. It's essential to agriculture sector and our homes. So energy and energy transformation comes from many places, right? So it starts with each of us. So I will go to the next slide, and hopefully you can see my screen. Marcelo, it moved, right?
That's fine. You have a new one.
Yeah. Great. So here you can see a number of areas that all of us can potentially be part of and participate in. I'm sure some of you or many of you already have solar panels on your roofs, or maybe your parents have or used or tried electric vehicles. Maybe you have even more intelligent system in your home or in your condominium or in the neighborhood where you can have solar generation as well as the electric batteries, or maybe the systems already installed within the factories or other facilities where your parents work, or maybe you were driving by and saw these installations in the field. And the same thing with the wind generation. So you've seen the wind turbines and things of this nature. By the way, about a week ago, I think President Trump was addressing the nation, and in that address, he mentioned that the wind turbines kill lots of birds. That's why they are bad, and this is a very good example of fact checking, even when someone very authoritative and was entrusted office, so to say, makes a statement. Very often those statements are not correct. And so this is one of the statements that is not correct. So lots of journalists and of course other professionals did the fact checking. And actually the fact of this is there are more birds in the US killed by cats hunting for them than times over than the actually wind turbines can do any type of damage. And this is one fact checking. So always check the facts. Unfortunately, it's becoming more and more important in our world for many reasons. So I won't go into the details, but every time there is something that sounds so dramatic, you really have to go and look whether it is so. So here, what does it mean the customer is fully engaged? It means that this transition towards the clean energy, towards the energy that is generated by clean sources such as solar, wind, green hydrogen, and other clean molecules such as biomass, etc., are not going to be here just by magic, right? It takes a lot to make it happen, and it's going to be up to many of us and many of you to get engaged on many levels, on your household, home level, neighborhood, industry, the company with which you're going to be collaborating or working for. These things are changing as well. And energy is going to be really cool because energy is going to be tradable between the households. Energy is going to be clean energy is going to be tradable between the households, within the neighborhoods, on the region level, on the town level, and many other types of agglomerations or the communities. So this is something that just evolving, and this is something that will be legislated, so there will be laws and regulations around it. And it's a very cool time for thinking about the new solutions, new systems, also the type of payments that can facilitate that, such as blockchain. I'm sure you've heard about that. So that would be also a very interesting area to think how, from the very centralized approach where there is one big power plant that is managed, we can transition to the so-called self-generation and micro-generation, as well as the neighborhood or the larger scale generation that can be shared, managed, and controlled um, as a community. This was not possible 10 years ago. So it's a new field, and there's a lot of innovation and a lot of new technologies that will evolve in this area. And it's a very interesting area as well. So I've already mentioned that there will be lots of innovation and lots of new technologies, and not only technologies, but also the business models, meaning new businesses and the way they operate will be needed in these areas, in the renewable electricity, both solar, wind. Here you can also see biomass, so coming from the agriculture waste, food waste, etc. Marine technology, generation of electricity from the waves, so-called renewable gases, as you could see on the picture, and how that distributed and clean generation can be distributed in the most efficient way to where it is needed. And just to let you know that the sector that is very difficult to decarbonize is aviation, right? So it's the fuel that is used in the airplanes. So here I think we have longest so-called goals, and more technological challenges. I think you probably already know and see, and it's thanks to Elon Musk that a lot of people are already familiar as to what's happening with the electric vehicles, and he made it cool. And now everyone is following. In Europe, we have big plans for decarbonization of the mobility sector, including the electric vehicles, but not only. Um, Buses and trains that you can see on the picture. So this is the so-called medium complexity. Then we have agriculture. Agriculture also is going through the phases of decarbonization. But as you might know or not know, in agriculture, the fertilizers that are being used to grow the food that we consume are not clean, so to say, because they are produced out, the nitrogen that is needed for agriculture is actually produced from the carbon fuels. So there is also a challenge how to decarbonize agriculture sector. Industry, for example, steel making or industry related to the glass production are very energy intensive, and so it is very difficult to decarbonize industry. So in Europe, there is a plan now to decarbonize industry through the production of green hydrogen. And that's a very cool gas. And I think if you're interested in chemistry, if you're interested in engineering, look it up, because there will be a lot going on related to the green hydrogen. and households. So decarbonization of the households, what does it mean? It means, I've mentioned already the distributed production systems, but not only. I think a lot can be done on making sure that we're using the technologies that um, can um, um, facilitate so-called flexibility. It's a very interesting field, and it's becoming more and more possible and accessible because of the emergence of so-called Internet of Things technologies. And what is Internet of Things technologies? Are the sensors and connected devices. So in principle, our mobiles are Internet of Things. And if we link the sensors that can understand how we use electricity in household items, then these devices become so-called edge, sitting on the edge. And by understanding how the households consume resources, not only electricity, but also water, in some cases gas or heating, then we can orchestrate the system, overall energy system, in such a way that it's more optimized. This gets a little bit more complex and complicated, but it is an interesting trend where the data and data related technologies and digitalization is linked to the energy production. And this is one of the fields that I'm active in, and call for action, be knowledgeable about data and ICT, and also get really engaged with energy. And as you can see, energy could be anything and everywhere. So my call for action is be curious, look at the sectors. They will all be relevant, and you have at least the next 20 years to a big task to accomplish, and the participation of everyone on many levels, as professionals, as the household members, and as active members of the community, is going to be very necessary. So that's why I will go back to the first picture.
Actually, we need to get the next speaker on board because he was waiting for some
Great.
time. If you want to have any final thoughts, and then we'll make the transition. Thank you so much for presenting.
Thank you, and all the best. Any questions, feel free to address.
Yes, we're waiting for him to come back because he left Zoom. So the question that I'll have will be, where can they get more information? And should they go to the European Union website? Should they go to any specific location where they can get easy to read and easy to understand information that will get them closer to deciding if this is their passion or not?
Absolutely. So in terms of the energy transition overall, right? If you well, first of all, try to follow what Greta is communicating. There's a lot of efforts that are being put in the number of organizations that she's collaborating with. So there is a lot of good information that is coming out on that level. There is also a very interesting report that is coming, and we are waiting to see that, which I think is going to be much more accessible, so to say, much more interesting for teenagers and school age young people, which will it's an initiative, a global initiative, and it's a report of the youth opinion on the pathways to decarbonization. So I think we can share with the participants this report when it's coming, and maybe a number of additional links. I strongly encourage everyone also to follow and even to look, watch the Greenpeace history, and understand, how and why the activism and the level of engagement is very important on this. In terms of the books, I strongly recommend to have a look at the recently published book that is called "We Are the Weather" by Jonathan Foer, an American author actually. So he links, how we influence the weather on many levels. It's not scientific report book or a study, so it's accessible and would be interesting probably to read. And there are additional sources that I think I can share with you, and maybe Marcelo, you can distribute.
Okay.
There are a number of initiatives.
Yeah, sounds good. If you just send me the links or any attachments I can share with the community over here. We tend to send an email every month when we're announcing the new program, and quite often we give them free books and all sorts of things. And this would be a very good package to offer them. So thank you
Oh,
so much.
sure.
That was great to have you on board, and good luck with the next 30 years for the Vision 2050.
Yes, once we have goals till 2030, so one step at a time, one decade at a time, that's for sure. Thanks, Marcelo, and all the best for everyone.
Thanks, Bob.
Be engaged.